Chapter 3. Take, the- Take the plunge, start a conversation. You are armed with pocket full of icebreakers. You know that if someone greets you, you have got some great material for conversation. Just having topics in mind to goes a goes a long way toward improving your skills. However, there are still a few gaps that can give you needless heart palpitations. Right now, you only feel prepared to respond when someone else engages you in conversation. So, you walk into your son's school and wait for another parent to say hello. You go to an industry dinner and try to act busy while you hope for a colleague to come along and talk. No, no, no. It does not need to be that stressful. Matt McGraw, an information service manager in Denver, described how a situation was made less stressful because of his initiation of small talk. When I was much younger, 19 or 20, attending the University of Oregon, I worked part-time for a couple of years at local hospital. My job title was Prep Tech, and my role was to prepare the male surgical patients for surgery, which included shaving them. As you can imagine, this was a difficult job for me as well as the patient. I began my work at 4:30 a.m. So I was usually very early when I was preparing my first patient. I would spend as much as an hour or more with each one. The shaving itself was difficult and physically uncomfortable. The patients were hungry, oftentimes in pain, and weirded out by having another man shaving them. Many were sick, facing mortal fears. An open heart prep required shaving a person 100% from chin to ankles. Hopefully, I have painted the situation as difficult. But I soon discovered that everything would go 1,000 times better if I engaged them in a small talk. I found out that they relaxed and that the time went by much faster if I could draw them out of the moment. We didn't talk about their health or their fears or politics or sports, but just general, easy stuff like where they lived, what it was like there, where they were from originally, things like that. I totally agree with you about the power of small talk. It is not about an agenda, but is simply a way to acknowledge a person as being very real and there. In the end, I suspect my patients talked to me more than they had a chance to talk to all of their doctors and nurses put together. It was an interesting job. You can start the conversation. Yes, you. It's not nearly as hard as you think. And the best part is that it puts you in charge of your own destiny. Instead of waiting for anyone to talk to you, you choose your conversation partner. What a concept. You get to select someone, you might even enjoy it. The rules are simple. When someone gives you a smile, you're naturally inclined to smile back. Be the first to smile and greet another person. That's pretty easy. Just a smile and a few words. It's done. Be sure that you make eye contact. That simple act is the beginning of establishing rapport. In those few seconds, you have shown an interest in the other person. However, if the thought of this makes you want to jump into bed and pull the covers over your head, practice flashing your pearly whites in setting that requires nothing more. Walk through the mall and just say hello to 10 people as you pass. As you cut through the parking lot into the grocery, greet the 3 other shopkeepers. Keep practicing until it feels natural. My friend Barb took a leap out of her professional comfort zone to run for a city council. She is a natural at small talk anyway, but she discovered something very important during her campaign. At public forums, the other candidates would enter the room, find their place on the dais, sit down to review their notes, or prepare answers to anticipated questions. But Barb would mingle with the people in the audience, make a personal connection as many as possible. She discovered that the best way to get people comfortable enough to open up and express themselves was to look into them in the eye and ask them, "What's your name?" Making eye contact and placing the emphasis on the word your rather than the word name signaled to the person that they were important. She never failed to make a connection when she used this approach. What's in a name? Okay, now you actually do have to stay and talk, not just offer a passing hello. Make it a point to remember the other person's name. What? Make it a point to remember other person's name. Learning and using names is probably the single most important rule for a good conversation. So, stay focused during the introduction. Repeat the name back in your greeting. Nice to meet you, Debra. Nice to meet you, Gagan. Like that. To help yourself commit the name to memory, immediately use the person's name in the conversation. Refrain from thinking about your reply and concentrate on the other person's name. Focus on the name, repeat it, and then formulate your answer. If you get distracted during the introduction and miss the name, confess. Don't go through the whole conversation pretending you know the person's name. It's better to say something like, "Excuse me, I'm not sure I got your name." It is always preferable to have the other party repeat it than to fake it. Never ever fake it. This is especially true if, for example, you run into someone you have met previously whose name you cannot recall as you are standing in line at the movie theater. Don't wait for the divine inspiration. Say, "I'm so sorry. I have forgotten your name. Please remind me." This proactive tactic will prevent impending disaster. For instance, you have forgotten your client's name, and in the midst of the conversation, your boss advances your way. How will you introduce your boss to your client if you don't know your client's name itself? Never put off requesting a name reminder before moving on to chatting, or you will regret it. The worst is the gambler who approaches with a sure bet. "I will bet you don't remember my name." As I am not inclined to increase the ante, I found immediately and asked to be reminded. You no longer have to worry about avoiding people because you have forgotten their names. Assume the burden. Tell the truth. Chances are you will go on to have a very pleasant conversation. Even if you are on the other side of the crowded room, or passing on the grocery store, go over and greet the person. If you avoid someone because you are embarrassed over having forgotten her name, you have just compounded the error with rudeness. Individuals with foreign or unusual names get slighted more than the rest of us. Make it a point to learn the proper pronunciation, even if it meant the other person repeats it a few times. When you take the time to learn another person's name, you are expressing a sincere interest in that individual that will be warmly received. Conversely, if you get lazy because a person has a difficult name, you are sending a message that it's not worth your trouble to learn his name. Remembering names is well worth the effort. In fact, learning names is part of hosting the conversation. A host is always expected to know and use every person's name. Since the host is responsible for making introductions as new individuals enter the conversation, I was seated at a table for 8 and met 3 people who had arrived at the table before I did. As others arrived, I extended my hand, introduced myself, and then made the introductions to the other 3. I said, "This is Linda with Sun Microsystems, and John with Sony, Sam from Association of Safety Engineers." Acting as the host puts everyone at ease and creates an atmosphere of warmth and appreciation that naturally engages conversation. It is also it also positions you as a leader in the group. Next, the names. If a colleague introduces himself as Michael, don't call him Mike. If he wants, if he wanted you to call him Mike, he would have introduced himself that way. If someone has a difficult name, make the effort to learn it. Do not shorten it to nickname without permission. It makes me crazy when someone shortens my name to Debbie. I know I am not alone in this. After a meeting, a woman, Julia, walked to me and said, "Debra, I have wanted to tell you something. My name used to be Debra also. I used to give presentation for the government. Invariably, someone called me Debbie while asking a question. I hated the name Debbie. Finally, I couldn't stand it anymore. I changed my name to Julia." Make sure you use you people's name and get them right. For instance, I call a client whose secretary answers, "Catherine Winter's office. This is Suzanne." I responded by saying, "Hi Suzanne, this is Debra Fine. May I speak with Catherine?" Notice that I used each person's name and did not take liberties with any one of them. Susan is very important because she represents the gateway to my client. It would not serve me well to annoy her by slashing her name to Sue, nor would it be helpful to avoid using her name altogether. Using people names shows that you are interested in them and makes them feel special. Another example, when I was at a video store returning a couple of overdue movies, I started talking to the clerk while we waited for my account details to show up on the computer. In the course of the brief conversation, I used his name and asked if he had seen every movie in the store. By the time my late fee showed up on the screen, he cancelled them and told me, "Have a nice day." When you use another person's name sincerely in a conversation, it makes that person feel special. It's better to give than to receive. It's just as important to give your name when you meet someone, even if you have met him or her previously and think they should remember your name. Consider it at a random act of kindness. Extend your hand. Hi, Patrick. Debra Fine. How are you? By stating my name, I let Patrick off the hook. If he had forgotten my name, I didn't show, and he didn't have to waste conversation time being distracted trying to recall my name. My current, second, and very last husband is period periodontist. As a group, periodontists are known for their charm or gregarious personalities. Frequently, when we go out, our patients recognize him and start a conversation without reintroducing themselves. My husband didn't have a clue who they are and feels awkward. He can't include me in the conversation easily because he can't get through the introductions. Don't ever assume that someone who sees you infrequently will remember your name, especially when they see you out of context. You will remember the retailer who spent a Sunday diving you around looking at houses easier than she will remember you, especially if you are in the sweats at the gas station. Cut her some slack, offer your name when you say hello.